Hi, my name is Harry T, and welcome to Odejuma. Odejuma recognizes the magic of storytelling, from personal experiences to stories of adventure, from tales of resilience to finding joy in the simple things. This story seeks to inspire, entertain, and educate because there is power in the stories of everyday people, and these stories are worth telling. Hey, y'all, welcome to another episode of Odejuma. I'm excited about this one because I have Ryan Walker Edwards here. I got a chance to see Man Code online, and it's like one of my favorite short films ever.
Hey.
So very excited to have you, Ryan. Hey, Ryan, how you doing?
Hey Harry, how are you? Yeah, I'm good, man. Not too bad. I'm good. It was bank holiday weekend in here, so everyone was out at carnival and whatever parties people were at. So yeah, it's been good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I saw the videos from Carnival.
Mm.
Did you have like a costume on? Were you outside? Were you
I
getting
see.
your
I was
on?
outside, but only for the food because sort of like where I was like we're kind of like quite close to the carnival, so it's really easy to walk in, get some food, see a couple of people, and then sort of like go back to my house. So I was outside for a bit, but then I was inside for the majority of the rest of it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's
Yeah.
good. Excited. That's something I want to be a part of because I know I see the videos every year.
You should go.
Since I've been like, it's on my bucket list. I have to be at Notting Hill Carnival with a costume or two.
With a costume, with the sequins and everything. Okay,
With,
yeah.
with everything.
Yeah.
Yes. I want
Okay,
that.
cool.
But I was talking, when I was introducing you about how I found you like on Man Code,
Hmm.
which is it's such a very, very interesting short film because we're going to get more into it later on. But just want to say that when you are looking at short films that talk about like the queer experience, sometimes it hinges on trauma a little bit. And this is just a regular experience,
Yeah.
another day in the life, and it just was very nice to see. And then I went to, I just did a little bit digging and I'm like, oh, you're also the writer of the short film, and I thought that was
Hmm.
pretty cool. But before we get into that, I want to just know a little bit about growing up for you. What was that like? And when did you
Um,
decide that you wanted to be in the arts?
be in the arts. Well, yeah. I'm Caribbean Jamaican, from Birmingham, which is in the middle of England. It's the second largest city, even though people don't really like to, talk about it in that sort of way. But in terms of getting into the arts, I think that my parents got me into improvisation and acting. I would like to say it's because maybe they sort of like maybe saw me and was like, okay, cool. This is someone who probably is going to maybe have a marginalized identity. I don't know. Is going to have to be quick with it. Who knows in that sort of way? I'd like to think it's that way and not a bunch of trauma. But in terms of getting into the arts, there was a lot of improvisation, which was part of like a drama sort of like workshop I went to after school. It was great because it was free. That one really right there was sort of like based a lot of the times on sort of like merit, and you had a load of different people from all different backgrounds there, which was good. And then from there, sort of like went on to do a bit of acting. And then I think what I found is that I was acting a bit, but I wanted to create my own sort of like work because I think there was a bit of a disconnect maybe from how the industry saw me to actually who I kind of was. Yeah, a lot of my early stuff was kind of like quite hood and, quite a little bit stereotypical. And then there was a disconnect sometimes going into the room for auditions, and then you'll be turning around. And I was studying literature at the time. So, as one does when they're reading all these books, you're coming with these thoughts and they're just like, okay, like it sometimes there isn't necessarily a connect there. So that's why I started writing. So I started with a radio play, and then I sort of, well, before that I kind of went into music, and then the lockdown happened. So then I basically brought out my radio play, and then that did quite well. Then did a theatre play, and then Man Code happened, and yeah, we're kind of here now. So it's been slow and steady, but yeah, getting into the arts to answer your question was really just through giving myself a little bit of confidence when I was younger, and then that just snowballed into this other beast that we're here with now.
That is pretty cool. That is pretty cool. You talk about being a artist. So you did music, you've done
Mhm.
theater, you did a radio play. Now you're doing film. Do you consider yourself like a multi-hyphenate artist? Like that is like your identity, or you
Okay.
been an
um, You know what? I think that's something that's happened by default. I think going back to what we were saying before, where a lot of the times you're sort of searching for the infrastructure that isn't really sort of afforded to you. So you sometimes do need to produce the things, you do need to back it, you do need to collaborate. You're doing a lot of things. And I always hate the analogy, like sort of like working twice as hard just to get half, but sometimes that is like a prerequisite to even get into the room. I know
Mhm.
that does cause trauma and that's because a lot of burnout sometimes, but I think, yeah, it's just been a multi-hyphenate by default because it just felt like where I was sort of coming from. I needed to sort of like push the ideas because when I probably go into the rooms and say something or say, hey, this is it, a lot of people maybe won't understand the reference. That's why, yeah, to answer the question, I do think I'm a multi-hyphenate. I do. Sometimes I wish it was a little bit different, but I think a lot of the times, if you want to sort of like take control of your narrative, you do have to do a load of different things and collaborate with the right people.
I mean, you say you wish it was a little bit different. Can you like talk about
Mm.
that a little bit more? Like, in what way do you envision it's ideally for you?
Well, it's great now because I think with projects like Mancode and speaking to lovely people like yourself and all the other people have shown like love to the project and have supported it, it
Mhm.
opens doors and it allows for like entry, to be honest. Like you're now tested, which is good. But I think just starting out, even though yes, you do have to like work hard. I'm not saying, I just wanted to sit out and chill and be like, yeah, like give me all these things. But it really was about backing yourself. And I think the reason why I did fall into sort of this multi-hyphenate like all compassing like artist thing was because I think there wasn't the infrastructure there. And I think in terms of the support and like there were a few mentors, but it was sometimes very far and few between. So I really had to kind of take in charge by myself. And yeah, that's great. But like I said before, doing a lot of stuff can also lead to a lot of burnout. And that sort of working twice as hard, like analogy that I sometimes that my parents gave to me, I'm a bit like, yeah, but working hard and then you only just get slightly into the rooms and, you're only getting half. It's difficult itself. So yeah, it's complex, but we move in it. We move.
Yeah, and it can be frustrating because it's like, why do I have
Mhm.
to work twice as hard? Like, why do I have to, put in so much work to get like, a tiny piece of the pie? So,
Yeah.
I resonate so clearly. How do you manage that though?
How do
How
I
do you take care of yourself going through that process?
I think I've got a really good support network where I can just rant. I'm using today as a way to rant and to speak. But I think I've got a good support network and just to really be kind to myself. I think before when starting out, you want to do everything. There's always this thing. I'll push yourself out there, like do this, do that. I think now I'm slightly a little bit more targeted, and I think with that allows for like rest. I think sometimes just being able to say, hey, look, I don't have capacity to do this, or I don't really want to do this at this time, is such a great thing because it's not all the wheels aren't in motion. And then I can just focus on maintaining and nurturing the things that I already have and that I want to grow. Yeah, that's where I kind of am at the moment. And just, I don't know, watching a load of films, sleeping, trying to be human, trying to be like, an actual, like, look, like, relaxed, like rest is resistance in a way. So that's what I'm trying to do more of. Yeah.
That's real. That's real. I feel you on that
Mm.
one. And you talk about your background a little bit. You said you were like
Mm.
Caribbean,
Yeah.
but born in the UK.
Yeah.
How does that influence like your work? And how you approach your work? And are there like any influences you pull from your background?
You know what? It is complex, I think, because I am Jamaican and Caribbean. If anyone, Pentecostal, Bethel, so very Christian boy. So
Mhm.
in terms of my work and stuff like that, I was always the odd kid. Like I remember literally I think the first day we went to this new church and I got into a fight with someone, like literally like one of the younger kids. It wasn't a bad thing in a way, but I think it was always like I was a little bit of, I wouldn't say I was a troublemaker, but I was very cheeky and very questioning of things. I don't know if that is obviously lent into sort of like the stories that I tell and like, my own queerness, but it was always this thing of like, I think sometimes in terms of like, especially like Caribbean, Jamaican culture, especially when you're talking about the sort of like religious side of it, there is sort of a lot of respectability and strictness, as one would say, with it. And a lot of the times being younger, I always I didn't rebel, but I'd ask a lot of questions. And then I was called like bright or like, feisty and that type of thing there. And then I sort of like used I channeled that into like, a lot of like my work. I think I'm thankful to, my parents, especially my mum, who maybe didn't necessarily have the language, but would also try and sprinkle maybe a little bit of like her kind of like support in certain ways. Obviously, it wasn't like, as much as I could get from the actual world, because again, like, cultural things. But I think it did influence me a lot in terms of the comedy. So I watched a lot of like Oliver Samuels, who's like a really big like Caribbean like actor, comedian. A lot of my
Hmm.
work kind of features a lot of comedy. I feel that in terms of like the Jamaican culture, it's fiery, it's beautiful, it's vibrant, but there are some sort of like there's a lot of emotion there. And I think that's what I want my work to have. I want my work to have a lot of humor, but a lot of emotion, and how those two things meet and how awkward it can be. And how cruel you can be to your characters as well, like the life that you sort of live. So yeah, I think in a way, yeah, my background, all parts of it, whether the parts I deemed as good or bad or kind of like a little bit confined or sort of like a little bit, I would say a little bit too much too much in terms of like imposing rules and restrictions. Even
Hmm.
that has sort of allowed me to kind of write and come from the place that I want to that I'm coming from now, because I've had the ability to sort of like question it and also like show the humor of those things, even in terms of man code, it comes through there as well. So, yeah, I think the background, I wouldn't take it for anything. I wouldn't take it away for anything, I don't think. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And I feel
Mhm.
like I also kind of like, have similar backgrounds to grow up in the church, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of
Yeah.
resonate with like what you're saying, basically. So Man Code, right? The
Mhm.
critically acclaimed short film that you were a part of, that you wrote, exploring hookup culture around Black queer men in the UK. What inspired the project? Give me like a little bit of background about Man Code.
This always gets you into trouble, but it's just like, okay, cool. So I think in terms of like man code, I think a lot of people's way into, I'm going to say like queer life, especially like dating, especially for some like, Black men, especially like being in from Birmingham as well. A lot of it comes through sort of like secrecy and, like this DL culture, which I think, it's a double-edged sword in a way, because in a way, like there is so much scrutiny that you kind of have as like, a Black person, Caribbean person, stuff like that. But then it's one of those ones where like it can also be a safety net in a way as well. But in terms of like man code and how that story came, it was sort of, I think Theo and Lucas are sort of two sides of the same coin, where in one way, I think both the characters sort of like represent things that I've been through in terms of like how I've seen like myself. You've obviously got Theo, who's this person who, again, we talked about if I, play close to the rule books that my parents have given me, if I basically sort of, go down this road of being this sort of like, straight edged guy who has everything in order, has, the house, the wife, the girlfriend, this and that. But again, I'm not still fulfilled inside. But then I'm doing all different things to try and sort of like mask that. And obviously there's a lot of humor with that within the film. And then on the other side of the coin is Theo, who, at one point it's just like really kind of like liberated, very sort of like, section president who he is, but it's kind of a bit of like a rebuttal or a kind of like attack on what Lucas represents. But in his own way, he wants to find love, and he wants to find who he wants kind of like maybe what like Lucas had in a certain way, but in on his own terms, but is kind of going through the day to day of sort of having like, relations with like other men and other people. So I think when they're together in this room and there's nowhere to escape, they really have to confront their own demons. So not one of them is a hero or the villain. I think it's literally just the spectrum of like where you find yourself within kind of intimacy and sexuality. That's really what I wanted to explore there. And there are things that, definitely I've sort of like been through, growing up. So it was really good to put that in the screen in a real kind of like nice and also like funny way as well. So yeah.
Yeah. And how do you think that people are, well, let me rephrase. You recreated this work. How do you think folks are receiving it? Or how have queer folks in the UK, what have
Mm.
they told you about how they're feeling about the work that you put out?
To be fair, it's been nice. It's been nice. It's been good. I think there's been more like good than than bad. It's been really good. I think a lot of people are saying, "Oh, what happens next? What's going on? What happens next?" Like, there's obviously a before and there's an after. I think it's good that there's finally a bit of, even though there has been representation there, like that I'm not the first one to kind of like put kind of queerness, like Black queerness on screen, and I don't also want to be the last. I just want to add to the canon of that. But it's been really good in terms of people talking about it, starting a conversation. It's going to sort of like different places, as we spoke about, across the UK, and then also being online and starting a conversation about like, okay, cool. So what would you do in this situation? How would you be? Would you leave the room? Would you stay? Would you, try and sort of like, let's just say ease it out, pacify them. Or it's really interesting just having the conversations, the comments and the discourse and what people are talking about. I do like it. I really do. I do like it. And you make work, you put it out there and then you just like let it do its thing. And I think it's been really good. Yeah, I think a lot of people have said some good things about it, and it's okay even if people don't like it. But yeah, I'm happy with what people are talking about.
Yeah. And I saw that there's a quote from you on director's notes, and it says, "This is not a queer trauma story. Instead, it is a witty tale about two men from Birmingham practicing
Mm.
the ancient art of hooking up and discovering a deeper sense of intimacy through honesty." That's a very fascinating quote to me.
Yeah.
Can you expand a little bit more on what
Yeah.
that means? Yeah.
Yeah, so the director, myself, like Adrian Gardner, the director, like myself, like when we're kind of like coming together with with the story and stuff like that, we wanted to kind of like put something out there that wasn't this sort of stoic piece of kind of like queer artwork or something that is. I remember originally when we were sort of like pitching it around before we found our people, and a lot of people wanted it to be slightly a bit more experimental, or the tone was slightly off. And I think sometimes when it comes to black work or just in general like marginalized work that doesn't necessarily like get the views or doesn't necessarily get commissioned or triggers finance, there is this way of like, it must be quite sad to be you, or it must be like, so therefore it has to be this place of pain, and then you're feeling a certain type of way because then you feel burdened to represent everything on the screen. So we kind of came together and we said, no, like this isn't a story that wants to kind of, it has those elements in it, it does, but we wanted to kind of provide like hope. We wanted it to be, okay, this might be like a bad experience for someone. This is a story that obviously includes shame and, all these other politics and taboos around sexuality, but we wanted to find the sort of like joy and the nuance within that. And I think that's where that quote comes from, where it's like, in terms of like everyday people are, getting intimate with each other, and it's a part of like, life. That's what happens with adults and, humans. We just wanted to show it from a point of view that had like, happiness there, there's hope, there's tragedy, all the above, not just this one single thing of like trauma that you normally see. And I know everyone talks about black trauma. I know it's needed. I think that we should have stories that tell like a plethora of things, but we just wanted to add something else to it, which was a little bit of humor, a little bit of fun. I'm not entirely sure if people like understood the tone, what we were going for. They probably thought we were taking the piss, as we say in England, which are taking the mick. But we wanted to kind of show that element there, that okay, not everything that you deem as okay about a guy who's struggling with his sexuality or shame, it's not exactly, he's not this character that is like downtrodden. He's actually quite smart and intellectual, and he knows exactly what this is. And then there's this reverse that puts it on to Theo, who might be this person saying, oh, I'm so fabulous and I'm going to show you what it is like, and it actually makes him question himself. So we wanted to explore all of that in there.
Yeah. And that's very real. I feel like there are folks who are struggling with their sexuality because of how society talks about queer people and talks about if you're black and you're queer, and that is not all on the person who's having that experience, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes we have those conversations in a very black and white way, but there are lots of shades of gray, right? People have different reasons why they show up in the way that they do, from like maybe growing up very religious, or just, growing up in an environment that will not condone any form of queerness at all. And so making room for people. And I'm not saying that because I know, not being able to live yourself can lead to some harmful
Oh
behaviors,
yeah,
right?
it will
But
come
it
out in
doesn't
other
mean that,
ways.
it could stress in other ways, but we need to have a wider conversation instead of a micro one. Like, okay, what
Yeah.
is going on in our society that makes people feel like they can't really show up in a way that is authentic to themselves, And I think that's what I actually do like you said, in the film, there are no heroes or villains. It's just two people from different experiences hooking up, and that's it. Like, what does that, how do they show up based on those experiences? Yeah, I think it's a really great short film. Like, I feel like I have seen a lot of black queer stories, and I feel like this one really like made me like stop
Thank
and
you.
think for a bit. So,
Oh,
you know,
thanks. Yeah,
well done.
thank you, Harry. Thank you,
No,
thank
no,
you.
for real. I have a curiosity though about like, because I know that there are lots of people who are trying to like make it in the industry. And a lot of folks who are queer, who are acting,
Mm.
sometimes always feel like, I don't want to be known as the person that only does, so I don't want to be the black gay actor or the black queer
Yeah,
actor.
the typecast. Yeah.
How do you approach that? I mean, I'm sure you've done a couple of
Mm.
projects, but this is like a project that is taking you
Yeah.
across the world. So,
Mm.
it can be very career defining. So,
Mm.
what do you think about that? Basically, is it that, do you not mind that? Are you open to how people
Mm.
perceive you?
Um, it's such a complex one because in a way, it's going back off what you're saying. It's like, okay, show yourself, write about your experiences, and you do that. But then it's really hard because then you're going into the industry that wants you to sort of like be vulnerable and be yourself. But then you know that that can also put you into a box that, especially for when we're talking about like queer, gay, or black roles, the parameters of what that can be quite limiting, and how that looks, and also can be not necessarily provide the nuance that it has in your own sort of work. So I think how we've sort of looked at that is kind of having really good conversations with sort of like your team, again, sort of like pivoting in different ways that you can create nuanced work, different stories, just being slightly a little bit more maybe like mindful of sort of like maybe what projects you are attaching yourself to. But again, people have to eat, people have to work. I understand that. I think it's just a conversation, and just looking at like where you want this to go, like what you want to do, and where you are in your career as well. It's a conversation that's always changing. I don't think it's this one set thing. But in terms of myself, I think it's just I've really had the ability to, speak to kind of like, like reps or people who are like dealing like with my like work and stuff, and really have like thoughtful conversations and say, hey, by the way, like I'm forever changing. Like this is what I've done, but then I also can do other things as well. And it's going back to what we said at the first point where, walking into a room and I'm like, a tall Jamaican black man from Birmingham, people automatically, if they don't know me, will be like, okay, cool. He's hood or this and that or whatever it is, because based on those things where I was at that time. And I think that can also be the same thing with maybe sort of like the work that I sort of like have at this moment in time, where I might step into a room and someone says, okay, he's that. But then it's a little bit on me and also on the team to just package that and say, also, it's not just that. And this is my interpretation of this role. I don't need to kind of do this sort of like the archetype or even like the stereotype that I've put out to you. I can also defy that as well. And if they don't like it, you know what I mean? It is what it is. So yeah, that's me. Yeah, on that side.
That's pretty cool. Do you have like
Yeah.
any other things you're working on? Any like projects that
Mm.
maybe you were writing or directing or act or stuff you're just maybe like just acting in?
Yeah. So yeah, there's some good projects that I've got. Uh, one that I'm kind of excited about that we're sort of shooting now, which is really good. So that's a feature. In terms of like Manco, there's obviously been conversations to kind of like expand it. It's kind of the same role, but there's a slightly different sort of spin and tone on it, which is quite interesting. It will still hopefully appeal to exactly like what it made this one special, but it just expands the story slightly a little bit more. And I'm kind of excited about that. Yeah. Then in terms of like our next project, we've got Speechless coming out, which I think that project is going to be interesting because it's one that I'm sort of like I'm directing. Well, we're co-directing with Adrian as well. So that'd be really good. But it's looking at being single at a wedding receptions, and the aunts and uncles who question you on that, but through humor. And there's a bit of a twist on it, but I think it will hopefully appeal to a lot of, let's just say, a lot of single people, a lot of like men, a lot of queer men who go to the weddings and they go, so how can we find someone for you, and the talks, and you're gearing yourself up to enter that space where, there's not a lot of, it's so familiar, but it's unfamiliar. So it's uncanny. And there's not a lot of, you feel safe, but there's not a lot of safety. That's what we're kind of
Wow.
working on there. So, that'd be really good. So we're just starting pre-production on that, another short. So yeah, and there's a few other ideas that we've got spinning around. But yeah, it's exciting stuff, I think. Really, really exciting things that are going on. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really cool. I'm really excited to see Speechless because I
Mm.
am, I don't want to age myself, but I'm like 36, and
No,
and
you're not lucky.
being
You look good, man. You look good. You look
thank
good.
you. 36 and being single, that's like, people ask you that a lot. Like, oh,
Mm.
so what's going on? What's happening? Why, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
that's another relatable story. So I'm excited to see what that will look like for someone with like, there is a perception with like immigrant black families, or in your case, like people from Africa, Caribbean,
Hmm.
who are navigating like queerness, and like, you know, it's like, oh, the consensus is like, oh, this is a very homophobic culture, and people in this community don't really like the gays and the queers and blah blah blah. How have you been able to navigate just growing up in that sort of setting? And is that your reality? Because it's not everybody's reality too as
It's
well.
it's
You know what I'm
it's
saying?
not everyone's reality, but it's just also that your reality might be safe, and that's good. But then if you then take that out to like a different, community or different subsect of that, then it
Yeah.
becomes completely different. And like not everyone is like the same thing. It's not like a monolith in terms of different families and cultures, and whether you're 7-day Adventist to Pentecostal to this, it's completely different, right? But
Yeah.
in terms of navigating that, I think the question that we wanted to propose is like, where are then all like, what happens to the queer elders? Because they're there, but sometimes that visibility isn't sort of given. So if you don't really know where you're going or what the end point is, then like where do you sort of stand? So I think it's really just about sort of like showing that, and then showing that, okay, cool, there is life like through this, there is kind of happiness at the end of it. And I think that's really like what I sort of have had to sort of navigate in terms of like, in various things, whether I do take sort of like, sexuality out of it. It's like, no, there is ways within this that I can thrive in certain circles or doing this or doing that. But I think to people who might not necessarily know that, and there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of like kind of treading on new waters, I would say. There is this kind of like visceral protection that kicks in. That's like, oh no, don't do that or don't be like this, or straighten up, sit down, do this, do that, because you want the best chance at survival and the best chance of happiness. But then what you realize is that like happiness does also exist outside of, the normative things that maybe people see. So I think it's kind of, I can't explain this in terms of like a reception, or like one day I'll be like, yo, this is the thing, because it's just like, they'll be like, oh, you're annoying me now. But I think it's really
Yeah.
showing them that there is like other ways to kind of live life. They are just as valid and as equal. And I think that's what you've got to do. You've got to be unapologetic about that. And it's scary because it is lonely sometimes. But I think once
Yeah.
people see you, I don't know, like thriving and just doing your thing, and obviously just being human, like it's not everything's going to be great. But I think it eases people, and they start to say, okay, cool, well, maybe it isn't so much like this, and maybe we can do that. I think it's about visibility, and that's great. And I think that's why there needs to be more of it, more ways to think, more ways to like do things, and more dissent, more the challenging of things. I think that's great. Also being respectful as well, because people will cuss me. So yeah.
Okay. And speaking of
Yeah.
visibility and also adding that to representation, how do you think that how would you gauge visibility and representation when it comes to like Black queer
Hmm.
stories in like the British film and arts industry?
But no, they are there. They're there. Like they've been there. Whether or not a lot of the stories get the amount of success or visibility that certain other stories get, because of
Mm.
whether it's marketing, whether it's talent that's attached, whether it can sell. Like there's various different reasons as to why. It's like things that I think this is the thing, because now I feel like now it's getting like more not safe, but there's a more visibility there. So by default it becomes safer. But I think there's a long history that like this work has been shown, but there comes a time in every like 5 years where, I don't know, some company or institution says, oh, this is like queer films, and it's just like things you've never even seen before, but they've been in some sort of archive. So they definitely are there, and I think it is getting better. But sometimes then what gets scary about that is it's about like, okay, what's the intention behind it? Because we can slap like, Black characters or, characters in certain situations, but if they aren't fully fledged out, if there's no nuance, and if they're just fallen by the wayside, it doesn't really serve anyone. And then people sort of like get a bit apprehensive to tell a story again, because they're like, oh, well, that one didn't do that good, or this and that. So I'm always a firm believer of having people behind the scenes writing, creating, who kind of understand that background. Hopefully they are from the background, but as long as it's they're understanding that background and they understand what story they're trying to tell, rather than just being like, okay, there's visibility there, but there's no nuance, there's no kind of care with the stories, it's just to kind of tick a box and say, oh, this is great, this is visible, this is on trend. Because then once that trend goes away, then what happens? It's like we're then back to the drawing board, and then you're working twice as hard, to try and get you just do. I think it's great. I know that's a bit of a negative one. I think it's really good visibility's there. But I sometimes am very apprehensive when there is this sort of like visceral, like, we need this, we need this, we need this. And I'm like, but it's already been there. So like nurture that, build on this, build on that. because sometimes it feels a bit like a fad, and yeah, it's a bit strange, and it feels icky because then you're in the room, you're trying to tell all these things, and it also is then questioning maybe people's perception of what they originally wanted anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's difficult, but yeah, I think to answer your question, I'm happy that it's people are having these conversations, and I think it's also looking at like what's going on in your community. So there's always people doing stuff, and it's always good to like network across and really
Yeah.
building those people, because they'll go on to do whatever it is, and then it carries on from that. So yeah.
Yeah. I feel you on that one. Like, yes, there's visibility, but how do we make the visibility consistent? How do we make representation consistent? And how do we
Hmm.
platform like the folks in the community, actual folks in the community telling
Hmm.
the stories, and not like
Yeah.
queerness from like black, straight man's perspective,
Yeah.
or,
It's
or queerness from a
yeah.
white, straight man's
It's great. It's
perspective.
crazy because ego is a real thing, and it's just a bit like yeah. I talk a lot, so it's a bit like to go into a room and then be like, okay, but you're questioning. Okay, you want to question people, but then you want people to also engage in a conversation and see things from different perspectives. Not saying that my perspective is right or yours is, but just having the ability to question that, and like, who is this? Who is this for? Do you know what I mean? Or like, what does it serve? Because ultimately putting like marginalized people or people with hardly any visibility on screen, it's going to be politicized anyway. I would love to get to the day where it's not and they're just stories, but like this happens, it does. So it's a bit like, it's that question of do I want us to tell our stories? Yes, but do I also want our stories to be told? Of course, yeah, So it's like it's really a conversation that's just, you have to just keep maneuvering it, and just be quite like intentional with what's going on. But yeah, I think at the moment in time, I think it just needs to be more of it. And also it's not just talent, it's also just people creating it, writing it, like they're all through every department, just like, making it work. I think that's the main thing there.
Okay. Would you
Yeah.
ever do music again?
In terms of music, so I would like, when it comes to music, I'm like, I used to basically like run a load of like music, like event, like nightclub nights. I don't know as well, like if that was also a part of like, in terms of like having something that was like queer, because obviously a lot of house music and a lot of music that was played is obviously from like Black queer men in, the States. So kind of seeing that visibility there, I don't know if that lent into something that I'm doing like right now, or like what it was. I think, yeah, I am still into music. I still collect a lot. Like I've got a load of vinyls like all over there, like scattered around. But yeah, I would say I'm still an avid fan of music. I still find influence through music. And it's still, even when I'm like writing some things, I know it sounds a little bit like, ugh, but certain songs make me feel certain types of way. And I feel like that's what sometimes helps me push ideas forward. Yes, I love music. I love it. Like I listen to music every single day. I think every single day.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, maybe this is a good time to pivot to our rapid fire questions then.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And the first one is like, what are the top 3 songs on your playlist like right now?
Oh, top 3 songs. Top 3 songs. Let's have a look. I think in terms of my top 3 songs, what I was listening to today. So there's Tanya Stevens, a Goggle. That is a real like, she's great. She's a real kind of like dancehall Caribbean artist. I don't know, it's something to kind of get down to, which is good. Another song that I have is, I obviously like a lot of electronic music. So there's a song called York, Big Brother's Watching You. It's kind of like a really chanty song. Like when I listen to certain songs, I'm like, this feels like really end of film, or like something's happening. And that song right there, in terms of like how it's like building and like what it does, is amazing. And there's another song from one of my favorite films called Baghdad Cafe, because it's just a bit of a weird film. I think it's by, is it Percy Adlon or Aldon? Javetta Still, I'm Calling You. It's just beautiful. Like I just love the song. I was actually at a bar in Southeast London, and there was this DJ, and he was playing all these tracks, like real like blues, R&B, and he was playing that song. And I went up to him and I said, "Yo, this song is great. Like, what is it?" This is before I even saw the film. And he handed me the vinyl. I think I've got it somewhere, which is like the Baghdad Cafe, and it's just like, that memory right there is just solidified like why I like that song. And then I went on to watch the film, and I thought the film was a bit very crazy, but I really did like it. So and then my 3 songs, so Tanya Stevens, Goggle, York, Big Brothers Watching You, and yeah, Javette Still, Baghdad Cafe, I'm Calling You. Yeah. amazing. They're my three.
Okay, cool. I've
Yeah,
never heard any of
yeah.
these songs. I'm gonna have to go check them out for
Yeah, no,
sure.
definitely. There's something for everyone. There's like, there's the slow burner ballads, there's the real kind of like dancehall things, and there's something that's sort
Mhm.
of like a bit more trancy and like ambient in there. So that's good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. What are your top 3 movies of all time?
You know what? This question always like bugs me because everyone's like, "What are your top movies?" I'm like, I feel like I watch so much, and I watch so much movies that also. I like the real head because I've been to a few film festivals, and it's just a bit like I like seeing like the avant-garde art, experimental, niche with a twist.
Mhm.
But then it's like I also like just sitting down and watching like I don't know, like the Stepford Wives from 2004, like something that's just really like just a bit like garish and sometimes a little bit camp. But in terms of the films that I like, so I think a film that I probably would say like I remember having it on, like my dad had it on video, which was Spike Lee's Crooklyn. I don't know if
Mm.
you've watched it, but really fun, really good, very bright. Just about like kids in Brooklyn and like their mom, dad, and just all that goes on in like life. Really, really cool film. Also very emotional, but really good, really fun. I also like in terms of another film, I like is it Ninja Thyberg's Pleasure? I don't know if you've watched it, but it's basically about it's obviously about like sex work and like adult work, but it's also about what happens when you want to get into you try so hard to get into a room, and when you get into that room you no longer want to be there and you see it for what it is. And I feel like a lot of
Mm.
people can kind of like relate to that, not necessarily like the sex work or anything like that, but in terms of wanting so hard to be something that when you finally get there you sacrifice everything that made you kind of like an actual kind of like functioning like person with empathy and emotion. And I feel like a lot of the times in life, like that can happen, especially when you're trying to go for something that is so kind of up there, or so like like wow, like it's put on a pedestal. That once you finally get up there, you're like, oh, this view ain't that nice. It's kind of that, and I love that film, and obviously everything they talked about within that industry as well. And then I think the last film I have is just a film I also watched from childhood, which was Steven Spielberg's Artificial Intelligence. It's just kind
Mm.
of very telling of this time where we're looking at artificial intelligence and like what is like love and obviously like family structures and if we create things and then once we no longer need it, we discard them, what happens to those things that we've created, that we've poured into. And I just like it. It's kind of like a modern retelling of like a fairy tale, but kind of bittersweet as well. I feel like all those films are very like bittersweet and kind of sort of like telling you something, but in a way, kind of not. It's just like just life, I think. Yeah, I like those
Okay.
films. Yeah, good.
Yeah, and I think that
Yeah.
these like your selections are kind of like getting us into like a peak of like your mind.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing that. Who are the 3 artists you hope to collaborate with? It could be
Oh,
singers, actors, visual artists,
ooh.
whatever.
So people's work who I like, who I get really excited about, even though I'm like they could create anything. I'm like, yes, like come on. I think at the moment in time, I love Beats Riley. Beats
Okay.
Riley, amazing director, really cool. And in terms of like the music and like his creation and how he like kind of puts together pieces, like I really like that. I like how he kind of like composes his films. Sebastian Silva, I just like a lot of their humor, especially around kind of like queerness and like gay shit. I think it's quite funny and how he does all of that and then also like embed some like real like kind of lessons learned in there. And then in terms of like, I think just someone who I've like probably like watched a lot of growing up was probably like Ben Wheatley. Just the kind of like British, like very like black humor, dark humor comedy. And I think all those directors, whether it's like Boots, like Sebastian and like Ben Wheatley, they all have this humor. They take real life situations and spin them on their head. And I thought that's what I want to do. And then add like, like a bit of my little twist on it. I don't know, like whatever that will be, but that's what I would like to do.
Okay, cool. It could happen. Never say never.
Mm.
Never say never. What is your guilty pleasure? I always ask everybody that comes on because I'm always very curious.
My guilty pleasure is that's always so I would say something basic like it's food, but I feel like that's just like something. Okay, my guilty pleasure is I like collecting music, but my guilty pleasure honestly is I've started collecting a lot of plants. I'm collecting a load of plants, and I'm treating them very very well, I would say. So in terms of like getting all the stuff for it, but There's a couple of plants that like I kind of keep in the bathroom, and I sort of like, when I'm showering, they come into the bath and they shower with me. But they don't actually, they're not in like the kind of thing, but like that is probably my guilty pleasure. I don't know how much I'm sharing right there, but just to kind of get them humid, and that type of thing. But they're doing well, so I can't. I can't really like knock that. But I think sometimes showering with my plants is probably like a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. And yeah, that's it.
I mean, that's fair. I hear that. I hear it's good to have the eucalyptus plant in your shower. I don't know how. I've never
True.
Done. Oh,
True.
do you confirm?
Not eucalyptus. I don't have a eucalyptus. We've got a monstera, which is it's variegated, which is really good. And then I've grown, especially in the UK, a soursop. I think it's a graviola or something like that, but it's doing really well. So I'm happy. So I can hopefully make tea with those leaves soon. Yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing: collecting records, eating food, and growing plants and writing. That's what I've been doing, and checking into therapy now and then. So yeah, that's the main thing.
Shout out to that. And speaking of food, what's your go-to comfort food?
My go-to comfort food, a fish dish. Like, I'm not necessarily pescatarian per se, but I could be. But I kind of like I love a lot of seafood. That's like my go-to. A bit pasta. Yeah, just seafood there, like prawns, like squid. Like that's me. What about you? What's your go-to?
I want to be very cliche and say I like jollof rice because I'm Nigerian.
Cool. Nigerian. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I think if I had to like talk about one from the Caribbean, it'd probably be ackee and saltfish. Something that is definitely my sort of thing. But them cans are a bit expensive these days, so like I'm just having to wait and just deal with other stuff. Yeah, I'd probably say seafood and then maybe ackee and saltfish. That would be the best thing. But yeah, what part of like Nigeria do your people come from? Like what? Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa?
So I am Urobo and Ishekiri. My dad is Urobo. My mom is Ishekiri. It's like the smaller tribe, the Niger Delta region. I do like to lead with Ishekiri. Apologies, Dad, because I feel like it only makes sense to take your mother's tribe should be your primary tribe. That's like that's my theory. And actually the name of this podcast is actually an Ishekiri word, Odejuma. Yeah. So
hey, if you like it, I love it. If you like it, I love it. That's great. So it's fine.
Yeah, but I was born and raised in Lagos. I lived in Lagos all my life. So technically I'm also from Lagos because that is the city that raised me and the culture that I moved through the world with.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
You were at the prime of your career, of your work. When people engage with your art, with your work, what do you want them to leave with when they do that?
You know what? Just a conversation or some sort of release, whether that's with humor, whether that's from being seen, whether that's a tear. I don't know, but I think it's just some sort of like reaction. Hopefully it's a good reaction. But I think just a little bit of humor, a little bit of like okay. And questioning things. I think that's the main thing. I think I want people to start conversations and to question like certain things, whether it's identity, how they move through the world, or how they really see themselves. But I just want also people to have a good time and just to laugh, and also to be shocked by different things that they encounter within the work as well. So yeah, that's what I would like people to leave with.
Okay, pretty cool. I was gonna see you do some work in the United States. I know there's a lot of crossover.
There is a lot of crossover. Who knows? Time will tell. But yeah, I think it would be on the cards. But yeah, I think I just want to probably just focus on sort of like telling sort of like Black British stories at this current time. And then hopefully if people like it over there, then it'd be great to sort of like export that. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan, for coming and for sharing and for letting us know you a little bit more and knowing your work a little bit more. And we're excited about the new iteration of Man Code, what it would evolve to be like. Fingers are crossed. And we're looking forward to seeing Speechless. And maybe when that happens, we can have you again to come talk about that also.
I would love it. Thank you so much. That'd be great. Yeah.
No problem. And if you've been watching or listening, thank you so much. Very appreciative. Don't forget to check out Ryan. I'll put the link to Man Code in the description, so you can check that out. Well, thank you, and Odejuma.